Live now.
Good evening. Welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet meeting, this meeting being held on the 3rd of February 2021. Welcome to members of the public and the press who are watching. This is a meeting that's being held in public as opposed to a public meeting. The chief distinction being that whereas in the case of an ordinary meeting, we would love to have people come along and ask questions. So whenever we're able to do that, please do come along and ask questions and attend in person. Because of the limitations of the technology, we're only able to do questions submitted in advance, so people aren't able to. It's not an interactive meeting. That's the chief limitation. But the positive side is people can watch this and play it back to see the decisions that have been taken and to hold their representatives to account. For any committee meeting being held virtually, all voting is going to be taken by a recorded vote. So each member will be going around in sequence saying which way they are voting, and the Democratic Services officers on this call will be assisting them with that by calling out people's names. The only exception to this really is approving the minutes or procedural items where items where the sole recommendation is for the committee to note the report, so they're not really substantive recommendations. In those cases, I will move the item and it is assumed that unless someone dissents, that it is accepted. Members are asked to please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves and pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in connection when it is your turn. And in addition to members of the Cabinet, members of the Shadow Cabinet are here with us today to raise any questions or issues that they might have with the agenda. Before I invite the Cabinet to confirm their attendance, could I ask that everyone checks that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent, that you're in an area where you're unlikely to be disturbed or where there is unlikely to be background noise. With respect to agenda items 1 to 3, we'll be taking these items together. Can I now ask members of the Democratic Services team who are supporting the meeting tonight to introduce themselves, and then we will move on to apologies of absence.
Heather Girling, Democratic Services Officer.
Chris Pedlow, Democratic Services Manager.
Great. Can you take us through the list of apologies then?
Chair, we've had one apology from Councillor Brenda Smith. I'll now go through to ensure we'll check which members are here and check declarations of interest and to check if members of the Cabinet are happy with the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 25th of November. Councillor Irvine, you please put your camera on.
Okay, Councillor Ian Irving, Cabinet Member for Housing. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I agree with the minutes of the previous meeting. Have I missed anything?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lamb.
Councillor Peter Lamb, leader of Crawley Borough Council. I have no disclosure of interest to make, and I of course agree, although we're doing agreement of the minutes by affirmation.
Councillor Johans.
Councillor Gorinda Johns, Cabinet Member for Environmental, Health and Sustainability. I agree the minutes of the previous meetings and have no declarations of interest.
Councillor Mullins.
I'm here. I'm Councillor Mullins. I'm Cabinet Member for Wellbeing. I agree the minutes of the last meeting and have nothing to declare.
Finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
Councillor Peter Smith. I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning and Economic Development and the Deputy Leader. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I agree the minutes of the 25th of November 2020 Cabinet meeting.
Chair, just for record's sake, there are councillors, Councillor Tina Belbin, Councillor Richard Burrow, Councillor Duncan Crowe, Councillor Brenda Burgess, and Councillor Kim Jaggard are also on the councillors' feed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone did actually go around there and say they agreed the minutes, even though at this point I'm supposed to check. So I'll take it that those are accepted. In terms of public question time, have we had any written questions in?
Chair, we have not.
No. Okay. There is one item of business today, which the intention is to take it in private. That is the report relating to a potential extension of the Hawth contract. Due to it being commercially sensitive and the interests of the town being that we get the best deal on this rather than giving away commercially sensitive information that may well prejudice that, it is proposed that we hold that in private in the session immediately after the public session. Have we received any representations on this?
No, Chair, we haven't. So that's fine to hold in public.
It's fine to move on with that. The next item are matters referred to the Cabinet and the report from the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. The Overview and Scrutiny Commission report has been sent round to all members, but I will be asking the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, which is Councillor Tina Belbin, to come in under each item to remind us of the pertinent facts as we discuss each report, which brings us on to the first substantive item of business, which is the petition which we received in relation to Crawley's Adventure Playgrounds. Could I hand over at this point to probably an officer, actually is best to introduce this. Introduce the actual item. Yeah.
Oh, Chair, it's going to be Heather Girling will read out the petitioner's statement.
Brilliant. If I can hand over then to Heather Girling, the Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a statement regarding the closure of Crawley Adventure Playgrounds from the Principal Petitioner. This has been updated since the Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting on Monday evening. The Adventure Playgrounds are a part of Crawley's history. They have been around for 60 years. I grew up spending most of my childhood playing in them, as did my parents, and so have my children. They are still well used by so many local families. We love having somewhere to go that provides a safe place to be outside, socialising and exercising, with toilets, staff and refreshments available to all. Parents can meet up and we can bring the little ones along and they play here all day. They make new friends, gain confidence, get fresh air and exercise without it costing a fortune. Play has been proven to be a vital part of a child's development. Play improves the cognitive, physical, social and emotional well-being of children and young people. Through play, children learn about the world and themselves. They also learn skills they need for study, work and relationships, such as confidence. Throughout the last 12 months, the younger people within our community have suffered severely. They've been forced into lockdowns and quarantine, taken away from their peers, family members, schools and general social circles. Many children have shown to be struggling with their mental well-being, and here you are saying that when they are finally able to get out and mix again, they will have nowhere to go. Youth of today are the future of this town. It is how we treat them and look after them now that will have a huge impact on the future employment and economy of Crawley. Just because they can't speak up does not give anyone the right to ignore their human rights to play and good mental health. The Adventure Playgrounds also offer reasonably priced childcare services throughout school holidays for those of us that don't have the ability to pay private fees whilst we are at work. For some parents, this is a lifeline and we will be lost without it. Without these supervised play areas, where can you go knowing that the kids can roam free without the worry of safety and knowing there is always a safe adult to hand if needed? Where will our children go to socialise now? What type of people could these areas attract if unsupervised? It will be the older generation complaining when they are out on the streets, causing mischief and creating issues due to boredom, or the council complaining when having to deal with the cost of therapy requirements due to them stopping going out, socialising and relying solely on technology. We don't have the old youth clubs anymore, so these are usually the only safe options. What good will your decisions do for the mental health of the next generation? If it's not viable to keep all 4 open, would they not consider keeping 2 open and to give families the opportunity to utilise them? They stated that Waterloo still has a pot there for the new equipment, so has that already been accounted for? Public consultation was only to 1,200 Crawley residents and only one question referring to play areas. So that is not a fair response. Please, we urge you to look at the options again and review this decision. End of statement.
Thank you. I'll now take the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, followed by Councillor Belbin as the OSC Chair. So Councillor Mullins will introduce the report.
Thank you, Peter, Chair. I read this earlier on today and have listened again tonight to it, and I can't help feeling a lot of empathy with the writer of this statement. And I too, in all the years I've been in Crawley, remember the adventure playgrounds and what they have done historically. You know, and we are not killing off activities and interests for children. In fact, what we're looking at very much is how we can expand and develop interests for children, including outreach work and including the two adventure playgrounds that actually won't close. They might change a bit, but they won't close. We will be keeping open Cherry Lane and Mortley. Both Mortley will be refurbished, and they'll both be very modern refurbished adventure playgrounds. But why are we doing this, and why are we making the changes? And it's quite important that people understand the reasons for our new decisions. We're under a background of increasing financial pressure on the borough, and these are very, very difficult times for us to work finances, and certainly my budget is one that's always going to be under threat because it's all voluntary activity. So we are in a situation where we're going to have to look at new and imaginative ways of working with our young people. Can I just make the point that the existing adventure playgrounds are designed for 5 to 13-year-olds and not teenagers, and we were not, as a town council, responsible for closing the youth centres. That wasn't our decision. That was West Sussex County Council that took those away, and we opposed that move at the time, but they did it nonetheless. We are in a situation where we are looking forward, not backwards, and we want to develop very much youth activities for our children into the future. As part of the budget setting process for 2021-22, the council has to reduce the overall costs of our services, and in taking these decisions, we will save something like £210,000 straight away. If we were to try and keep all 4 adventure playgrounds open, the other 2, Creasy's Drive and the Mill Pond in Bewbush, would cost between £500,000 and £500,000 to refurbish, a very considerable amount of money that we actually don't have, and we cannot run those as out-of-date services. You know, when we looked at the figures and we've done the analysis, with the overall costs of running all 4 centres, they come out at something like £30 a visit, you know, a child visit to the centres. This is an unsustainable amount of money, and in fact comes to more per annum than the average D rating for the council tax. It is very expensive business if we were to carry on that way, and we just have not got the finances in my portfolio to do that. So we've had to face this as a reality check. What we've discovered by looking at the past graphs and up to modern times is that there's been a 68% reduction in the number of children attending activities by the play service over the past 20 years. In 2002-03, the total number of visits to the play service was 94,000 odd, nearly 95,000 actually, and with 2019-20, it had gone down to about 30,000, or just over 30,000. That makes us look, and has forced us to look, at the reality of the situation that we're facing now. We are going to be better focused. We are going to look at services for children, including, as I mentioned earlier, outreach activity through our play team. The council play service is primarily aimed at 5 to 13-year-olds, as I've said, and it is intended that we approach those children and their families. What we do with the existing centres that will remain open is look for advantages in running those, including booking the centres out and maybe try to involve schools and whatever we can do there to make those centres active and successful. I might add that we have many play areas around Crawley. Some are very modern now, and we are modernising many more and bringing them up to date. They're all unsupervised areas, but they're all very open areas where children can go and play in safety, because the inside, whilst they're there, they can be observed by people passing by or living nearby. The one reserve that I've got about our present plans, and I have to introduce this tonight because I would be wrong not to, is that the 2 existing adventure playgrounds that will remain are enclosed areas. They're fenced all around with a gate entrance, and once children go in there, it wouldn't be possible to see what was going on inside without actually entering the premises. That is a discussion that I have indicated to my officers that I intend to take very seriously, and I'm going to have that discussion on how we can ensure, because we are obliged to, both morally and legally, the safety of children using our services. So I will be raising that, and I want to assure anybody who's listening that I'm quite aware of that and want to make sure that that is safe. Chair, I won't go on much longer, except to say I'm sad that we've had to come to these conclusions we're at now, but I just think that it's inevitable. There's not much I can do about it, and the case has been presented to me very clearly. However, we do and will have still 2 unique centres in the end, which will be very viable, and we can concentrate a lot of effort and energy into, and I think they will be really worthwhile to the children of Crawley. And quite honestly, in these modern days, one at first is Furnace Green and one in Langley Green, it should be relatively easy for people to get to and to enjoy. So I'm going to say this very clearly, that what I'm going to be doing, if I can carry on in this portfolio, is ensuring that we have a very healthy future for children's activities, that we have a good officer team, a good professional officer team, and that we run good services that children will enjoy. Chair, I'm going to leave it there, but I'm quite happy to answer any further questions that people might raise.
I'll now ask Councillor Bilbin, as Chair of the Open Scrutiny Commission, to report back on their meeting.
Thank you, Chair. We had a discussion with Councillor Mullins on the report, so a lot of what Chris has said, obviously we discussed as well on Monday, but the main points coming out of the Commission was that residents should feel, if they feel compelled to organise a petition, if they were concerned, and bring this to us so that we can reassess issues. It was remarked that while the results of the consultation should not be ignored, it is important to recognise that it has, as Chris says, a 68% reduction in attendance at council organised play activities. It was acknowledged also that other providers, not for profit, might be interested in these adventure playgrounds, but might be put off by the fact that sites would require substantial capital investment that exceeded the current funds, and the operational costs were significant too. Children and young people have different expectations regarding play today, and the budget needs to be spent wisely with the play team being allocated in the most effective and efficient way possible to ensure children can continue to be engaged. It's noted that the adventure playgrounds were part of Crawley's history, and whilst they have been successful in the past, there is a need to move away from the static sites. The proposed outreach model was more effective and will be provided in open spaces, parks and buildings covering the whole town, and will be fully accessible and inclusive. Clarification was also provided regarding the average cost per visit, as this varied considerably, the sum being as high as £85 per visit. This cost calculation was done for different activity days and is not per adventure playground. It needs to obviously come into consideration, the costs per visit. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone who wishes to speak please put their camera on? Tina, your camera is still on. Thank you. Just people's bandwidth is not necessarily as good as each other's. Before I hand over to anyone else, I'd just like to say, it's worth noting the council has already acted on this since the petition was started, that the whole driver behind this change is financial. It is the reality that we are facing unprecedented financial pressure this year due to COVID, and that pressure will continue for a number of years with no ability to make up the gap. So either this has to go or something else does. We have a legal responsibility to set a balanced budget, and the budget is on the agenda tonight. Were we to turn around on this, then suddenly we'd have the problem of not having a legal budget we could pass, because there is no proposal set out for how we would make up the difference in expenditure if we were to suddenly reverse the council's decision. We have had some more money in, which has enabled us to continue provision until October, which was not the case at the time when this petition was started. So we have listened, but nonetheless, we simply haven't got the finances to continue past that point. And I take the point about external providers, but I think what has to be taken into account is that this is essentially the most expensive service the council runs when you look at the tiny user base relative to the high level of cost. And even with an extensive subsidy, there is simply no provider out there who is likely to be willing to take them on, given just how much money they'll be paying for every visit a child makes. It is certainly not something which a business could take on, or a charity, unless someone was pouring money into it, and that would not be viable in the long term. Councillor Mullins put on his camera, so I take it that he wishes to speak again on this item.
Chair, I put it on just in case somebody asked me a question.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who was here still.
Fair enough. I don't see any other cameras on, and I take it that the OSC at the end of that did actually agree with the recommendation. Unless anyone else wishes to put the camera on, in that case, can we move to Councillor Irvine?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, actually, I think Chris gave a very good account of why this has to happen. I know one wants to see this sort of thing happen, but that is the climate we're operating in at the moment. But knowing Chris as I do, and having worked with him on the council as I have for many, many years, I'm quite sure that as portfolio holder, the Crawley play service or the opportunities for play in Crawley will continue in the future, and he will be a very good steward for that service.
Thank you. As there are no other cameras which have been turned on at this point, I take it that no one else wishes to speak on this item. Could I ask Chris Pedlow to take a vote on this?
Chair, can I just clarify on the vote what the Cabinet's view is to in terms of the petition? Is it to respond to the petitioner?
Sorry, there'd be no change from the current situation.
Okay, thank you. excuse me, Councillor Irvine, can you confirm your vote in terms of what Councillor Lamb has put forward?
Yes, I'm for what Councillor Lamb has just said.
Thank you. Councillor Johans?
Yeah, 4 as well, please.
Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Mullins?
It comes around so quick when it's just cabinet, doesn't it? 4.
And Councillor Peter-Smith?
Thank you. I reluctantly agree to go with no change.
Chair, that was unanimous on the recommendation.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, which is a very extensive report, which anyone who's present at OSC will have gone through in some detail. Could I ask Councillor Johns to briefly introduce that?
Could I interject? Sorry.
Is it something on the agenda? Or?
Yeah, it was. I did get a note through today about responding to the petition, and I don't know if you wanted to deal with that at the meeting. It looks like a move from you. I don't know.
The only thing which was on the agenda, Chris, was that report, and we passed a recommendation on that report. So if it's not,
okay. I mean, then I got this note through, and it came from Kate Wilson concerning me writing a letter to the petitioner. But
right, but that's an action which can be resolved after this meeting. But
okay.
the key thing is that
it's no problem. Okay,
thank you. So the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, could I ask Councillor Johns to briefly introduce this report?
Yes, Chair. Was the chair of the scrutiny panel not introducing the report?
You are correct. You are correct. My apologies. Councillor Jaggard, as the chair of the commission, the scrutiny panel should introduce their report. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I was due to do that. Right, so just very quickly, very briefly, to remind you that the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel was created by a notice of motion back in July 2019. It was set up to make recommendations focusing on the workings and activities of Crawley Borough Council relating to carbon emissions and to report back to the council. And it was a really complex scrutiny panel. We had many outside witnesses, including West Sussex County Council, Metro Bus, Manor Royal, plus officers from Crawley Homes, Environmental Services, Sustainability, Planning, Commercial Properties and Assets, and many of the Cabinet members also attended our meetings. Our first meeting was in November 2019, and there were many members of the public in attendance. And whilst there was no public question time at this type of meeting, there was so much public interest that we decided to offer public engagement sessions whereby members of the public could request speaking rights on the meeting's theme for that evening. Those that contributed included Crawley Green Party, Crawley Environmental Action, Crawley Extinction Rebellion, and many individual residents as well. All the comments, questions, views were gathered from all these interested parties, and they are reflected in the report, which is very comprehensive and ends up with 19 recommendations. And that's as much as I want to say on it, because it is a very extensive report, and I'm sure you've all read it, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure other people will as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a very extensive report, and my asking for brevity is purely because of the amount we've got on the agenda, and we're going to be going through it again at full council, and no doubt living it in the period to follow. Can I ask Councillor Belbin, as the chair of the Open Scrutiny Commission, who went through this report on Monday, to give us conclusions of the Commission? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There was general support for the report and the panel's work. Panel members and officers were thanked for a very thorough and comprehensive report. It was considered that the panel's recommendations were very practical, and members thought the idea of a climate change impact assessment document on any new project or changing policy indeed to be very important. There was acknowledgement that there was an option to share the best practice with other districts and boroughs as well. There was recognition that in order to reach the carbon emissions target, the council may have to lead by example and change the way it works and adapt. It was commented that the heating of the pool at K2 was the major cause of our emissions. In fact, members were quite surprised at the figure of 47%. But the panel had recognised there were industry standards and there were mixed views from individuals on what the temperature of the pool should be at. There was support for the Climate Emergency Action Plan to be regularly reported back to OSC and Cabinet, but it was thought best to leave that with officers to decide how often they could report back to us. There was general support for all the recommendations from the majority of the members, but there was concern over going paperless. Some members thought that maybe staring at a screen isn't too good for our health, but Councillor Jaggard assured us that this wouldn't be compulsory if it was hurting somebody's health. During the debate, Councillor Lanza, and seconded by myself, moved a proposed amendment adding a further recommendation. We request that the Governance Committee look at future formats of council formal and informal meetings to consider which ones should be face-to-face, virtual or hybrid. No objection was expressed by other Commission members, and the inclusion of that recommendation was declared to be carried. Thank you. Back to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I will now hand over to the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Sustainability, Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep it brief and quick as well. I just want to say that I really welcome this report. It's a really incredible piece of work, and it's an incredibly important step towards us combating the climate emergency. I remember back in 2019 when we were first drafting the motion with our late friend Councillor Geraint Thomas, who's really very much the driver behind this, and there's no doubt that he'd be really pleased to see the panel complete its work. I'd really like to thank the whole panel and the officers for putting together such a comprehensive document and a really thorough report, but particular thanks to Councillor Jaggard for her excellent chairing and for all the hard work and effort she's put in alongside the officers to evaluate and consider the Council's current carbon emissions to help us draw up these recommendations. As Councillor Belbin mentioned about one of the points, I was really also pleased to see the mention of for the action plan to regularly report back to OSC and Cabinet. We did declare a climate emergency, so I think it's only right that we treat it like the emergency that it is, and it'd be a shame if it was just sitting on the sidelines. So I think it's really important that we are regularly kept in the loop of how that's progressing. As for next steps, I think it's really important that Cabinet should now refer the scrutiny panel's recommendations to the advisory group on the climate emergency. This is so they can review each recommendation as part of their process to draw up the action plan, as mentioned in recommendation S. We really do need to do this so we can translate all this amazing and excellent work into deliverable actions to ensure that we actually do meet our carbon reduction targets that we made in the declaration back in 2019. And obviously there's no point of making a climate emergency declaration and a commitment to net zero if we don't have a plan to reach it. So building on all this impressive work, I'd like to move just a modest amendment to recommendation 2.2, and that's to say that Cabinet endorses all the recommendations set out in section 6, subject to a full evaluation as part of the emergency action plan, and for the plan then to be brought back to Cabinet for us to consider as soon as possible. In addition to that, again, building on Councillor Belbin, what she mentioned about OSC, I'd also like Cabinet to agree the recommendations in 2.3 as well as 2.3C that was proposed by OC, for that to then be put to full council for consideration. And just to close, I'd just like to say I really look forward to seeing the action plan come to fruition from officers as soon as possible, hopefully later at some point this year. And a massive congratulations again to the chair of the scrutiny panel and the whole panel itself for such a valuable contribution in our battle against climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just in the context of those amendments, I mean, I think clearly we understand that officers need to assess the viability of how they try and deliver some of those, as recognised in the OSC's comments in relation to things like the heat of the swimming pool, how to bring those things forward. So it certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I too thank Councillor Jaggard and the members of the panel for looking at this and the work that they have done. It's absolutely right that we as a council should lead on this. I also welcome Councillor John's comments about, or his amendment I should say, about evaluation and then going back to Cabinet. For me, the big ticket items are property, transport and energy. And we are looking as a council to address all of those, and that's absolutely right. And just on transport, I particularly welcome on page 30, point B, about continuing to work with partners on the number of electric vehicle charging points in the town. I think we all know this is something that's going to be extremely challenging for Crawley because of the way our neighbourhoods are built. And it's absolutely right that in particular the county council that we do work very positively with them on this. I do, however, I've just mentioned what I believe that the big ticket items are. So it does pain me somewhat to then go on to two rather minor, well, very minor items in the scheme of things. And they are the K2 swimming pool proposal and the one about councillors having to go completely paperless. For me, it's important that the temperature of the swimming pool is one that people using it are comfortable with. The last thing we want is to be putting people off from swimming. Exercise and swimming is a very positive and healthy pastime, and the last thing we should be doing is anything that could risk attendance of that. So that does need to be looked at very carefully. And yes, when it comes to paper at meetings, of course we should seek to absolutely minimise the amount of paper that we use. I know that before COVID struck, when we had committee meetings in the committee rooms, we'd also have a whole load of agendas printed up and placed all over the seats for members of the public to read, regardless of whether members of the public came or not. I do believe that I think I spend about 12 hours a day looking at screens, and there is a limit to because councillors have their day job where they're looking at a screen as well, of course. And there is a limit to how much one's eyes can take, and so I do think we need to be a little bit practical about not seeking to damage members' eyesight, quite honestly, because I do think that is a potential risk if paperless is in all circumstances is forced upon all members. So just to highlight that point with the concerns that I have there, but recognising it is something that had previously been decided that in the scheme of things it's a very minor point. We're not going to save the world by making councillors' eyesight more worse, or making the dip in the swimming pool rather a chilly dip. Let's focus on the big ticket items, and we're right to lead on this as a council, and well done everyone for their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got 3 people on to speak on this item. Clearly it's popular. Can I just note that if we're all going to agree to it, discussion might not necessarily be the most productive use of time. And incidentally, I'm happy to second Councillor John's amendments, because it clearly require a seconder. So if I can bring in Councillor Peter Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to be too repetitious. Broadly, I particularly agree with Councillor Johns's comments. I know that our late good friend, Councillor Geraint Thomas, would be delighted to see this report coming to Cabinet and the proposals to adopt the recommendations. And as the original seconder of the proposal to to recognise the climate change emergency, I'm also delighted to see the results of the hard work led by Councillor Jaggard, who did a great job on it. I think I attended all of the panel's meetings, and I was very impressed by the quality of the debate and the common theme of people wishing to support the recommendations. The point I do want to make, which is a substantive one, is it's not just that we need to bring the response of the action panel back to Cabinet. I would recommend 3 monthly as a minimum, so to make sure it happens, but we need to have the resolution to actually take the tough decisions that are going to come out here, and we already see debate starting on certain of them. Councillor Crow's introduced some other elements. It's transport, for example, is more than about electric vehicles charging points. It's about reducing carbon emission across the whole town, which is a problem in our town, especially with the attention to the AQMA coming forward. So not going to debate the issues now, but I want the Cabinet and the whole Council to be resolute in implementing the resolutions and not backing off whenever somebody objects. And I hope not only will the Council set an example for the town, but also will exhibit a leadership role across the town with our businesses and our residents, encouraging them all of us to look at ourselves and see what we can do to reduce our contribution to carbon emissions in our town. I will obviously be supporting the recommendation and the amendments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Irvine.
In view of what you said earlier about time, I'll be brief. First of all, yes, like everybody else, I welcome this report, and I voted for the climate change emergency resolution when it came to council. I do, though, find myself in agreement with Councillor Crow. First of all, about the swimming pool, we want to make sure that it's still a place where people feel, happy to go and swim. And secondly, about the issue of going paperless. I mean, in the scale of things, it's not a huge deal, but in addition to what Councillor Crow said about looking at a screen all day, paper is more user friendly. You can refer to it at any time. You can flick backwards and forth, and it's just much more. I think it's a much more pleasant way to read council reports, some of which are very, very long. We have to say so. And given the effects that would have on our climate emergency, I don't really see that retaining paper for those who need it would actually be such a huge issue or have such a massive effect on the environment. The other point I wanted to make was about the proposal to ask the Governance Committee to look at council meetings going virtual. Again, I have to say that I really do not like this video calling. I think face-to-face meetings, for a whole variety of reasons, are much more useful and friendly. I don't particularly like sitting in my house talking to a computer, and I think there's a lot. Considering that most of us, considering that we do live in Crawley, very close to the town hall, going virtual, in my view, would actually do a great deal to cut carbon emissions. So I'll just leave that there, just a thought, and maybe sort of if it does go to governments, maybe we can discuss it there. But at the moment, I wouldn't be in favour of going to virtual meetings permanently. I understand why we're doing it now, but not forever.
I think conversations about having a look into the possibility of hybrid as opposed to permanent meetings. I think we've certainly all noticed that there's a difference in how they're conducted. Whether or not that's better or worse, I guess it's open to discussion. But the possibility of hybrid meetings would enable some people to participate who might otherwise struggle. Councillor Mullins.
Thank you, Peter. I'm at danger of going over the two items that Councillor Crow introduced, but I can't help it because the pool in particular is in my portfolio and I have to say something. Just a quick comment about the paperless. This document tonight is 187 pages. 187 pages that are double-sided, so that's double that, if you like. That is an awful lot of reading of paperwork on the screen, and I quite honestly, I can't imagine me being able to sit and read 300 pages, really, or whatever it amounts to, on a screen of a report on the computer. I just think that wants thinking about carefully. If people are happy to do that, I'm happy for them to do it. But I think it's a big ask. I don't mind reading ordinary emails, and I do it all the time, and we all do it, and a few pages, and it's not a problem. But 200 sheets or more of print is just too much on a screen. Sorry about that, but I'm going to leave that there. On the pool, look, when we built K2, and I was part of building K2, I've been down in the foundations of it. There's famous pictures of me somewhere. On the pool, we built a very environmentally friendly building, and I do believe at the time we were told there's a heat reclamation system in there. On the heating, we don't use gas to heat the pool. We use a biofuel or something that gets churned in there, and it was designed to be very modern and very environmentally friendly, with corridors that passed air around and etc. We talked a lot about that when we built K2, and so I'm very surprised that the heating in the pool has been picked up in the way that it has. Now, one of the ongoing complaints I get is from mothers with children who complain that the pool is kept too cold right now, in normal operations. Now, I can understand why that might be fairly cool, because sports people use the pool, and sports people who are swimming very, very fast like the pool to be cooler. But we also have the different modes in the pool and the different floor levels, and we can use it as training pools. We can use it for young children who are learning to swim, and children that are in swimming schools and are just starting out and are not moving very fast. And a lot of the mothers have been saying to me that they find the water too cold. We have the fun pool, but it is literally a fun pool, and there's limits to what you can do in teaching serious swimming in it. So we do need to think maybe about younger provision into the future, and I'd like to think that that's not gone off the agenda altogether. But in the meantime, with the pool temperature, I would like to say, and maybe if it was an amendment, that we investigate why we feel that the pool is environmentally unfriendly, because we didn't set out that way to make it environmentally unfriendly. We set out that way to make it the most environmentally friendly pool that we could build. However, it's 50 metres long. It's a big pool. But could we also say on that paragraph then that we investigate the heating systems for the pool to see if we can improve those environmentally? But in the whole scheme of things, this report is excellent from transport right across the piece, and I completely support the need and see the vitality need of making sure and ensuring that this town is out in the lead in creating the most environmentally friendly climate that we can. And in that, I'd throw in that we need to make sure about the airport as well, when it does start operating again fully, what effect that has on the town. So it seems to me that the pool in the whole scheme of things in Crawley would be a very small part of the environment, very small indeed. And I would hate to see our parents going to Horsham or to Mid Sussex instead of coming to the Crawley pool. And I'll make the point that we need to rebuild the attendance again at K2 when we come out of COVID. And we need to encourage parents to come back with their children to use that pool again. I'm going to leave it there because I've made my point. But I think that rather than just say that we've got to drop the temperature of the pool, we should investigate whether it's as environmentally as friendly as we can make it, and if and what improvements we could make so that we can keep the pool temperature, but also at the same time use a method of heating the pool that is acceptable to the environmentalists.
Thank you. I believe the current proposed amendment covers that, as it requires, it specifies that these things are positive in principle, but they need to be looked into before positive recommendations come back, whether they're brought back at the earliest opportunity. So I'm not going to encourage a further amendment. As Cabinet Member, I'd recommend that you look into that question to see what the possibility is. What I would say is that we did do a very thorough carbon assessment, so it's not been pulled out of the air in terms of what the council's biggest carbon generator is, and I suspect that there's very little you can do to insulate what is in effect a very large body of water with an enormous surface area in a greenhouse. I suspect the technology isn't really there for that. Okay, I've got no other cameras on, so in that case, we have an amendment that's been proposed and seconded. Can we take a vote on the amendment?
Councillor Irvine on the amendment.
Can you just, was the amendment about referring to?
I'll read out the amendment for you to make it clear. Bear with me. So the amendment Councillor Jahan's moved, which is seconded by Councillor Lamb, was the recommendation 2, that Cabinet endorsed the principles of the recommendation set out in section 6, subject to full evaluation as part of the development of the council's climate change emergency action plan, and that for the action plan to be brought back to Cabinet as soon as possible. And that recommendation 2.3, the Cabinet agrees that the recommendations in 2.3, in addition to adding the recommendation 2.3C proposed by the OSC, be put forward to full council. That relates to the full council endorsing the panel's recommendations, and that full council votes on paperless, the constitutional change over paperless, and over requesting the governance looks at virtual meetings. That's the 2 amendments. Councillor Irvine, can you please announce your vote on the amendment?
In the interest of democracy, even if I don't agree with the virtual meetings idea, I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Johans, on the your vote on the amendment, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
And finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
For the amendment.
So, Chair, for clarity, the amendment was carried. Now we have to vote on the substantive amendment or substantive recommendations as amended. So, Councillor Irvine on the recommendations. Thank you. Councillor Johans.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
And finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
For.
Chair, the amended recommendations are carried.
Thank you very much, which brings us on to proposed Article 4 directions, planning change of use from C4 to C4. Councillor Smith, could you give us a 60-second summary?
I'll do my very best, Chair. In section 3.3 of the report, you will see that the officers have identified 10 areas where there are clusters of houses of multiple occupation, and where we have received representations from both ward councillors and also in some cases the residents themselves, outlining the problems that these clusters cause and asking us to take action to do something about it. The option open to us is to implement Article 4 directions on these locations, and the recommendation is to commence the process of implementing those Article Article 4 recommend directions to prevent further HMOs in these areas. So I move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. At this point, I'll bring in Councillor Belbin as Chair of the Urban Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you, Chair. During the discussions on this report, members made the following comments. It was acknowledged that HMOs above 5-person threshold required a licence, and this assisted in monitoring, particularly the use of the map of licensed HMOs. The directions would target specifically 10 residential zones in Crawley, where there was a clear majority of residential dwellings that were 3 stories, terrace properties and multiple HMOs. Acknowledgement that the rationale was the coincidence of these type of properties increased the concentration and potential for HMO clustering. It was important to ensure that the evidence and figures used to support the proposal was robust, for example, in relation to the number of bedrooms. With regard to Burwash Road and Furness Green, there are no licensed HMOs on the current list, but this would be monitored. Concerns were raised regarding conversions to HMOs elsewhere and displacements to other areas within the neighbourhood and other areas within the town. It was anticipated by introducing the directions in some areas which currently have a lower number of HMOs, it may avoid the need to introduce further directions in such areas at a later date. Support for a welcome and balanced approach in this with this report. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Could I bring in Councillor Crowe?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I and indeed members of my group, the Conservative group, are very pleased to see this come forward. All bar 4 of the streets that are part of this are in Furness Green, and I've been the being the ward member coming up for 18 years this year. So I've certainly seen firsthand how the nature of the area has changed and how the number of residents raising this as a concern has gone up. But I must stress it's not about being against HMOs per se, it's about the uncontrolled growth of them that then leads to significant issues. You know, we want to have balanced communities, and if there are lots of houses in townhouses in a very small area where you have 4 or 5 adults with cars, you can imagine the parking difficulties that can create very quickly. So it's about the council having to be able to give planning permission or not, but basically it gives us some control and some oversight, and this will be very welcome indeed. So I just want to give my full support to this, and I particularly welcome it as a ward councillor, along with my colleague Councillor Caroline for Furness Green. But it's the right thing to do for the town. There are other streets here as well, and it's something that we do need to keep an eye on. It was talked about at OSC, possible displacement effect. There is one street in Furness Green not covered, where there's about 7 townhouses, and my understanding is that should there need to be a change, it's not that difficult to update this should there become a problem elsewhere, if there's any displacement effect. So just want to say well done to everyone who's worked on this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it implemented.
Thank you. Councillor Irvine.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree. I think this is a very balanced report. I'm particularly pleased that in paragraphs 3.2 and 4.2, the council does acknowledge that there are benefits to having houses of multiple occupation in Crawley. They do fulfil a particular type of housing need. And if someone wants to move to Crawley, they couldn't afford to buy a property, or they couldn't afford to rent somewhere in its totality, then without HMOs, it might be quite difficult for them to come to Crawley and work or set up a new life here. I'm also one of my concerns was how it was going to be decided which areas should be subject to Article 4 directions. So I'm very pleased that in the report there seems to me to be almost a scientific approach to assessing which areas require Article 4 directions, rather than just rely on the strength of local feeling. So yeah, I'm quite happy to support this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other individuals wishing to speak? No. In that case, can we move on to the vote? Thank you.
Councillor Irvine, please provide your vote on the recommendations.
For.
Councillor Jahans.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
Councillor Peter Smith.
For.
Chair, that's unanimous. It's opposed.
Thank you very much. Article, item 10 is the budget and council tax, which is me. As people will have heard at length in discussing the savings, the council is facing extreme financial pressure at the moment, motivated almost entirely by COVID-19 and its impact upon the council's main source of funding. The council is having to make about £2.4 million worth of savings this year, 1.6 of which is being made through back office savings of over 800,000 coming out of service delivery. The reality of it is some of that is being tempered for the next few months, until October, through some additional funding we got from the government at the last minute. Regardless, council tax would need to go up by 2.37%. At the same time, we will, due to the funny ways in which council's funding works, still have £20 million going towards affordable housing and a further £77 million going into investment in the capital infrastructure of the town. I will bring in now Councillor Tina Belbin as Chair of the Over Scrutiny Commission to give us their feedback.
Thank you, Chair. During the discussion, the following points were expressed. Confirmation that the savings for the pitch and patch would be made through an increase in fees and charges. It was noted that the service had temporarily had to close due to the pandemic. Clarification was sought on the redundancy provision and pension entitlement held within the pay policy statement. Confirmation that the £506,450 was agreed in December 2020 as a part of an in-year savings exercise, whilst the £506,000 had been identified as further current year savings as part of a consultation exercise. There was acknowledgement that there had been genuine cross-party working throughout the budget process and members have been involved throughout the budget process. Thank you. There are the OSC comments.
Thank you very much, and certainly I'd like to thank all those who participated in what has been a genuine cross-party effort. And with that in mind, I bring in my opposite number, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I will save I'm probably pleased to hear, I'll save my main budget speech until the full council meeting. But yes, just to add to any benefit of any members of the public who are watching this meeting, that yes, both groups have worked very closely together on this budget, and I will be seconding this budget at the full council meeting towards the end of this month. We've already heard from the leader how challenging this year is. It's challenging across local government, not just in Crawley, and we are finding that most local authorities, and indeed police and crime commissioners, are putting up their council tax by the maximum amount that they are able to do so. But we do need to bear in mind, of course, we did have 5 years of a council tax freeze just a few years ago, so that has helped to lessen the amount that we would otherwise be having to pay now in our council tax. But I do think this budget is the best that we can do. It almost sort of writes itself just to some degree in terms of what we're able to do and the savings that we've had to make. We did hear earlier on that we had received some extra money that was unexpected from the government, the lower tier services grant, I think it was called, and that has enabled us to put in some mitigating factors for this year's budget that we're all pleased that we're able to do. But what's really important is that we set a budget that keeps the council on a sound and stable financial footing. We would not want to go the way of, say, Croydon Council, for example, that had to issue a 151 notice. We would definitely not want to go down that route. So, I thank all the officers and members who've worked very hard on this, and it is the best budget that we are able to do, and I'm confident that it will enable the council to provide sustainable and good quality services going forward.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers at this time, so if I could ask Chris Pedlow to take us to another vote.
Councillor Irvine, can you provide your vote on the motion of recommendations in front of you?
Yeah, so I was having a couple of technical issues there. Anyway, yes, I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Johans?
For.
Councillor Lamb?
For.
Councillor Mullins?
For.
Finally, Councillor Peter Smith. From mute, sorry, Councillor.
For the recommendations.
Thank you. Chair, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you. The next report is item 11, Treasury Management Strategy, which is me again. This is a document which sets out how the council invests its money over the course of the year, or how it will be attempting to invest its money over the course of the year. There are no substantive changes to the policy. There is a format change due to the change in our advisors, but other than that, it remains the same as in past years, and we're simply being asked to reconfirm it. I will ask Councillor Tina Belbin, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, to give feedback from that meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Members wish the following comments to be fed back to Cabinet. There was acknowledgement that where the council had investments leased by other parties, it was the intention that rents were paid. Should that not be the case, given the economic circumstances, the council would liaise with liquidators or investigate relinquishing the property. Investments were entered into with the most suitable terms and best intentions. Clarity was sought and obtained on the likelihood of negative interest rates and the value of investments as a result of the potential move to a negative rate. It was confirmed that only Treasury bills were paying negative interest, and luckily the council did not hold any of these at present. Existing investments were mostly fixed term investments, and these will pay interest rates at agreed times when they were taken out. It was possible that there will be negative rates with regards to future investments. Confirmation that the maximum to be lent on any one organisation could be increased to correspond to the counterparty limits. Verification that in the event of authority in which a council had placed investments were to issue a section 114 notice, the organisation would still continue in existence and still carry out their statutory functions. All assets and liabilities would move across to that new authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers at this time. Councillor Irvine. Or I imagine you put on your camera to vote. So if we can move to a vote at that point.
I did want to ask a question, if I may.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is just on the investment properties of 145. Intentions to make a profit out of those. Do we actually gain a profit from them at the moment?
We do, yeah. We have existing contracts. Of course, some of those businesses are having difficulties, and that will impact upon that in the future to some extent. But for the moment, yes, we are making continuing to make reasonable income from those properties. Thank you very much. In which case, we'll move on to the vote. Chris, could you call the vote?
Councillor Irvine, can you provide your vote and recommendations?
I am for.
Thank you, Councillor Johans.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
And finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
For.
Chair, unanimous support on the recommendations.
Thank you. The next item is item 12, which is budget monitoring for Q3. The council tracks each quarter its actual spend against its proposed budgeted spend. and provides a report to show what there's been variation. Our budget last year was set in February of that year, which clearly predates an awful lot of the financial problems which emerged. Consequently, throughout the course of this year, we have been in deficit against that proposed budget. We are still in deficit against that initial budget. But the good news is that thanks to some additional government funding that came through, we've gone from being £700,000 overspent to only £100,000 overspent. It is also worth noting that the council itself has made significant in-year savings in order to try to bring those figures under control. I now hand over to Councillor Tina Belbin, Chair of the Open Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you, Chair. The Commission considered this report and would like to feedback the following comments. Confirmation provided in relation to Russett's Road play area, which was the only play area on the priority list that met the Section 106 criteria, and the money needed to be spent by the end of June. By completing this area, it allowed the team dealing with the play equipment time to work on other priorities within the next 18 months, including areas such as Wakeham's Green. Potential option for review of how reports were presented once the pandemic was over, although it was recognised that there were reasons why finances had to be documented in a particular format. The finance team was thanked for their continued hard work throughout the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone wishing to speak, so if we could move to a vote.
Councillor Irvine. Councillor Irvine, are you there? Voting on the recommendations on the quarter. Okay. We will move to Councillor Jahan then.
4.
Councillor
Lamb, 4.
Councillor Lamb, thank you. Councillor Mullins.
4.
Councillor Irvine, I see you're back, so
yeah, sorry, I had to debug for a sec. 4.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
4.
Chair, thank you. Chair, that's unanimous in support of the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Item 13 is the community grants future options. Unfortunately, the Cabinet Member for Public Protection and Community Engagement has been unable to make tonight's meeting, so I will present the report. Due to the budget, which we've just discussed, and the need to reduce our expenditure in line with our new income, it is proposed that charitable giving by the council is cut by a third. It's worth noting that still makes us twice as generous as any council of our type in the country, and that we also give a range of commercial property to these charities that would ordinarily not be given by councils. So we remain incredibly generous by any standard, but that does mean that a number of organisations will be affected. The council's approach has been to have the majority of the remaining money adopt a commissioning approach, whereby we try to get people to provide services that we believe need to be provided in certain areas that relate to the council's own working or key areas of infrastructure within the town, which is where the majority of the funding goes. And I think people will be very familiar with the sorts of names that involve their organisations like Citizens Advice and Open House. On top of which there will be a £50,000 pot available for match funding for local organisations for smaller grants, so that where organisations do have community support, the community can highlight that support by donating to those charities, and the council will match fund whatever is crowdfunded that way. I now bring in Councillor Tina Belbin to give the report of the Open Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you, Chair. The members of the OSCE would like to make the following comments. Recognition that of the many groups and organisations within the town, it was questioned if all were aware of other funding opportunities. The liaison work with organisations and signposting arrangements would be maintained. It was felt it would be beneficial for the new commissioning model to come before OSCE. Acknowledgement that in terms of a review process, the grants appeal panel was still in existence, and it was felt that this was the correct approach. Recognition that redesigning the service towards a proposed commission approach still enabled the service to deliver in an effective and efficient manner whilst maintaining the connections to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other cameras on, so if no one else is wishing to speak on this item, Chris Headley, can we move to a vote?
Councillor Irvine, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Johans.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
Finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
For.
Again, Chair, that's unanimous in favour of the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Item 14 is the forward programme of key procurements. This details key areas of procurement which the council needs to undertake between January and June of this year, with delegated responsibility and the process through which we're going to provide those procurements. It does provide to everyone a list of what is going to be procured, but at the same time I am delegated responsibility to make those procurements. This is a process which has been trialled over the past year, I have to say largely without, I think, myself or anyone else particularly noticing, because it's not a huge imposition, but it does give members the opportunity, if they do see something they wish to object to or feed into, to go through that process to ensure that their voice is heard. This did not go to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, so is anyone wishing to speak on this item? Please turn your cameras on now. No? Thank you very much, in which case can we move to a vote?
Councillor Irvine, is your
For.
Councillor Johans.
For.
Councillor Lamb.
For.
Councillor Mullins.
For.
And finally, Councillor Peter Smith.
Finally, for.
Chair, it's unanimous in favour of the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Item 15 is supplemental agenda. There is no supplemental agenda, which means that we move to item 16, which is as highlighted at the start of this. One of the reports has to be conducted in private. So the committee is asked to consider passing the following resolution. That under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Brilliant.
Agreed.
In which case, this live stream will be ending now, and members are asked to reconvene on the private link which was sent through previously. Thank you very much.